Hello there, YouTubers. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to YouTube. It's the 12th of August, year 2025, whereas at local Beijing time, it's still around 10:40 p.m. Yeah, so 10:40 p.m. on the 11th of August. I don't find myself, in such a, good mood that I feel like making another video. But since I have nothing else to do, nothing else I find, worthy or exciting to do at the moment, so why not just rant and vent and talk about some random shite to you guys. Well, so yeah, so um first of all, I would like to remind you that take heed when making uh when making a purchase online, especially on platforms like YouTube, Google, even on Amazon, blah blah blah. Since it seems to me that their payment systems have some serious vulnerabilities that directly allowed hackers to intercept your card details with so much ease, and they can just steal your money within a blink of your eyes so freaking easily. So so quickly. Yeah, so be cautious. Be cautious with buying things, in particular buying virtual assets such as a membership online. Since it's I suppose it's the second time or the third time. You maybe for a dozen times. I my card got hacked. Got somehow intercepted. By malicious users, namely hackers based somewhere on planet Earth. Well, I can't suppose that they they situated their base or bases of operation on Mars or on Neptune or blah blah blah. No, since I don't suppose humans could survive there. Well, not without a sort of space suit, of the most advanced level of sophistication and that sort of thing. But yeah, regardless, that's beside the point. So I just on top of that, on top of the a friendly reminder, to warn you about the volatile the hazardous nature of making a purchase online. On top of that, I would like to rant and vent a bit more about my shitty life and so on and so forth. So I see, a lot of guys, a lot of men, fussing about, the the very intrinsic nature of life, in revolving around and involving transactions. Well, I don't imagine that you should get too upset at such fact, though being being cruel, being kind of ruthless. You shouldn't, waste your time, on um, fussing over, something that you can't change. And besides, everything in life revolves around transactions, and exchanges. Even the very the very existence of organisms has to depend on constantly exchanging materials, matters, namely, the molecules, the atoms of charged ions, namely, say sodium chloride. I suppose at least every mammal, including, but are not limited to human beings, require sodium chloride, namely salt, to to survive, and since it facilitates and it facilitates, the transmission of electrical currents and charges within your body, and say, a neural impulse, and the say the hydration of your cells, and blah blah blah, all depend on sodium, on sodium chloride, on the sodium, on the sodium ion. That, say, I just give you guys, a rather simple but also concrete example, illustrating, the immutable fact that, the universe, in order for it to exist and keep existing, it has to rely upon transactions and exchanges of constant and regular exchanges of matters, of substances, of all those elements and chemical compounds. Yeah, since yeah, each and every intrinsic component of each and every organism has to metabolize, has to constantly burn nutrients they we ingest from food, and synthesize them with oxygen, with nitrogen, blah blah blah, in order to maintain all those homeostasis and bodily functions. Yeah, so you get the point. I don't want to drag this filming session for way too long, since I don't want to bore you with the technicalities and shit. And yeah, I'm quite surprised that I don't stutter as much in this filming session. Maybe it has something to do with the nature of such filming session being faceless. I don't really have to worry about looking embarrassed, or or feeling awkward, or embarrassing myself in front of my most beloved patrons and viewers and all audiences, subscribers, blah blah blah. Yeah, but yeah, just bear in mind that you do not need to fuss about the transactions play a vital role in keeping the universe running and the galaxy spinning. But yes, but there is the main issue, the main problem of the postmodern society is that they have effectively broken and undermined those social or societal contracts among classes, among among various groups and people. Most typically speaking, the wars, the wars between two genders, between men and women, are becoming more and more severe and fierce. They just well, so long as I suppose so long as both entities or parties involved in a particular transaction all honor the agreement, so long as they don't break the the agreement or the contract. That's how you establish. That's how you establish and maintain stability and harmony. But the main issue here, I imagine, is that yes, they have effectively undermined the social contract between a husband and a wife, and and parents and offsprings, parents, ought to love and properly educate slash impose adequate discipline, for their kids, for their offsprings, for their children. And on the other hand, the offsprings ought to respect and take care of their parents, and overall it should form a harmonious closed loop where each party gets what they want and need. But nowadays, well, at least throughout the whole developed world, and in some parts, say, in some parts of Asia, it's just turned into a total mess, a total pile of shite, a total dystopia, where people just don't give a damn about others' sufferings and needs. They just put themselves on a pedestal and just act and behave and act like an utter asshole, and keep giving others a second asshole, if you know what I mean here. Yeah, so since I am a businessman, or at least I consider myself a businessman, a man of my words. I always honor my words. Well, at least ever since ever since I repented of having scanned a few folks, a few poor folks in the past, when I was still quite young and kind of in dire need of money. I did some quite dishonorable shite in the distant past, back in Sydney, and yeah, as Sydney has become quite impossible, quite uninhabitable, and quite impossible to make a decent living. Well, unless you are super duper rich and powerful, then scratch what I just said about Sydney. But generally speaking, for the vast majority of people, first tier cities in the first world, like Sydney, New York, London, Brussels, Vancouver, blah blah blah. They all pretty much share a common phenomenon and a major issue, aka the cost of living crisis. Well, at least I suppose the cost of living crisis hasn't spread that wide, to say to a second tier city, or to say to some smaller places, smaller cities. But I suppose in my current location, yes, the cost of living has also skyrocketed to the point that normies, or and average Joe, or average Jane barely has any savings. So yeah, well, so if you take the fact, if you take the fact that I still have a bit of savings into account, into consideration, then maybe I'm just slightly, financial wise, then maybe I am just doing marginally 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 better than an average Joe or Jane. But on unfortunately, on the other hand, I do not have a family. I suffer from quite a lot of serious issues and trauma. Though I found a way or two to cope with them, and though say all the copes are beginning to lose their efficacies, that says their effectiveness constantly diminishes over time, more and more, to the point that it makes me afraid that I might, self delete, or um you know or or succumb to the temptation to commit suicide. Yeah. So yeah, I I believe that I have made my points clear about the fact that you guys shouldn't fuss about the fact that everything in life, not just everything in life, but in the physical world at least, involves and revolves around transactions, exchanges of either information or money or materials or matters, blah blah blah. Stop giving a flying piece of shite about it, but instead, stay far from weak and be honorable. Do honorable things. Don't, disrespect yourselves. Say, I know that some dudes, namely, say, hiding in my room, well, at least he confessed himself that he's selling, you know, his dick pics, his feet pics on OnlyFans and shit, you know, to some pervs, to some gay pervs, you know. I just, you know, it just makes me, it makes my skin crawl. It is so dishonorable, you know. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Respect yourself, you know. What else should I say? You know, it's just freaking dishonorable and, you know, shameful, you know, to just, you know, sell your body as a dude purely for money and fame. It's just freaking shit. You know, it is bad enough that we have to, you know, sell our time and health and youthfulness for money, for basic survival. It is already bad enough that, you know, pretty much each and every one of us has to do so in order to earn the so-called privilege of staying alive, you know. But you know, to some extent, you know, I can understand that one, you know, in particular, as a man has to work, you know. Though, you know, yes, please allow me to reiterate my stance on, you know, on work, on jobs. You know, I do not object to the idea and the act that we, you know, we work to make a decent living. We work to constantly improve ourselves and, you know, and improve, you know, our overall quality of life, you know. But, you know, I oppose, you know, the broken and rotten system of the conventional 9 to 5 grind, you know. And I highly suggest that each and every living person boycott the conventional 9 to 5 grind, you know, in order to say no to, you know, to exchange our health and happiness solely for money and man-made / artificial validations. Yeah, you know, so that is my stance, my stance on the nature of work and jobs. So yeah, and yeah, on the other hand, you know, on the other hand, people, especially NPCs, they do what they do because they are what they are. So stop giving a flying piece of shit about what they say about you, about, you know, how they judge you, how they judge us, and blah blah blah. You know, just, you know, go your own way and make sure it is an honorable way. As long as it is an honorable way, who gives a shit? Yeah, so I suppose I have talked quite enough in this filming session, and yeah, I sincerely hope that you have found this video to your satisfaction, or at least you can, you know, at least use it as a, you know, some sort of cope against this harsh and brutal reality. So yeah, thank you again for watching and listening and being with me to the end of this filming session. together we stay far from weak. Stay far from weak and stay out of trouble. Cheers. If God's still willing, see you around on YouTube, on BitChute, etc. Bye.